Oh, howdy y'all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to put together a guide to crafting physical damage weapons at a huge range of different budgets. Everyone starts a new league with nothing, and with a new league a couple of weeks away at the time I'm recording this, so some of these start under 10 chaos, whereas other ones start costing dozens or even hundreds of exalted orbs to pull off. The first thing that is worth mentioning is that there are diminishing returns on investment with crafting. A rule of crafting and Path of Exile in general to keep in mind is that modest power comes cheap and extreme power comes at extreme investment. A 200 to 500 exalt weapon will deal maybe 30 to 40% more damage than a 20 exalt weapon, despite costing 1500% more. Quick summary, there's a number of methods under 5 exalts that we're going to discuss here, and you can download this document if you want. Then we're going to start dealing with the 15 plus exalt options. There's a big gap there between 5 exalts and 15 exalts, and that's because the 15 exalt-ish method is so powerful that it pretty much obsoletes everything less than it. There is no point spending 9 exalts crafting a weapon when there's a pretty close to deterministic way of doing it for about 15 that is going to give you far better results. And as a result, no one's going to want that 9 exalt weapon, because if you've saved up 9 exalts, you may as well save up the other 6 and get something better. And then you can accept a 50% chance of ruining the item and spend a few more exalts on it. So that basically doubles the cost and adds 10 exalts. That will improve it further. And then there's another 2 versions that cost around 100 exalts. And then there's the top end fractured item method, which probably won't make you a merit tier item, but has a few percent chance of making one, is also going to give you the best results of anything here. So a quick disclaimer, this is based upon the game as it is in patch 3.17 in April 2022. The closer that it is to then, the more likely this info is still to be accurate, but please do due diligence before doing any expensive crafts. So before you attempt any major crafting projects that are expensive, check other sources to verify that the methods still work, because the game does get changed over time. Everything in this works at the time I'm recording this video, but may not work at the time you're watching it. And also never forget that at the extreme top end, it is almost always cheaper to mirror someone else's weapon, yes, paying them a mirror fee for it, than it is to craft a better one yourself. A couple of quick pointers about Trade League and also SSF. These are just things to keep in your mind whichever way you decide to play the game. First rule of Trade League is that when you miss with style, i.e. you roll something that is not what you are looking for, but you end up with something that's good, sell the item you are crafting and start over. If you're trying to craft a 575 or better physical DPS sword and you accidentally hit a 530 DPS one, that 530 DPS one might be trash to you from a purpose of is it worth equipping to your character, but it's treasure to someone else. That person will buy that from you for a considerable sum. You can then reinvest that into more attempts at crafting your 575 plus DPS sword. So second rule of Trade League, never be too proud to buy someone else's item rather than crafting your own. People get lucky drops they can't use all the time. Someone will be running an Essence Drain Contagion character through a Grand Heist and they'll see a magnificent bow there. And they'll be like, you know what, I'm going to take that. I'm not intending to play a physical DPS bow user at all this league, but I'm going to take that and I'm going to sell it to someone that is playing that build. Or they'll be attempting to craft something else and they'll miss with style, and as a result they'll have a cast off that is just not what they want. Or maybe they're somewhere ahead of you in progression and they used to be using something that was fantastic for them then, but they've got something better since, and they're looking to just get back maybe a third of what they paid to craft their item. Well, you're going to be happier to get the item from them than you will be to spend 3 times that amount and craft it yourself. Third rule of Trade League, never invest precious currency items. So we're talking things like exalts here. It's fine to use chaos orbs or things like that that are cheaper and easy to pick up, but never invest precious currency items into an item unless the payoff is going to be worth it if you hit. A benchcraft that adds 100 to 129% fizz damage is expensive, and there's a good example here. Use a lesser one on rubbish items. Use a lower tier than that, even though you would get better results by spending an exalted orb to put that 100 to 129% fizz damage craft on the item. Perhaps it's better just to go for maybe 93% with the lower tier and save that exalted orb for your next upgrade. And the first rule of SSF, it is okay to break the 3 rules of Trade League, but only do so after serious consideration. So think on it and you'll decide that sometimes you will go, you know what, I am going to spend this exalted orb. There's a couple of methods I no longer recommend. These were good in the past, but have become more marginal. Fossils. Almost no use for fossils in this video. That's because there's been a number of buffs to other crafting methods and fossils have remained unchanged. And whilst fossils used to be very, very good at crafting physical damage weapons, that's a couple of years ago now. They just haven't kept up with power creep. Secondly is alteration for 1 great mod on an elder weapon. This was the meta for people that are returning to the game after about 2.5 years off. You will remember this from the Legion and Blight Leagues. The multi-mod craft got nerfed hard after that, and also the Elder Weapon mods that were so much better than everything else that was possible to get have also been nerfed. So this is no longer something to even consider doing now. Before we can get into the actual crafting methods, we need to talk about one last thing, and that is the pieces that make a good physical DPS weapon. You need a solid base. Secondly, you need the next 3 of these. After that, everything after the next 3 is a luxury bonus. You need a physical damage % roll, merciless or a lesser tier substitute. Good mods here are very, 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 very rare. Bench mods, incursion mods, and unveiled mods all substitute reasonably well for this, but getting merciless is miles better. A flat physical damage roll, like flaring or a substitute. High tiers of this mod are uncommon, but not truly rare. Bench mod version is bad, the essence mod is great, with the deafening tier of essences is similar to the tier 2 normal mod. You need an attack speed roll, a celebration or a substitute. Note that the essence mod here is actually superior to all of the normally available mods. So if you can get the deafening essence of Zeal mod on your suffixes, then that is better than any of the other mods that are available as an attack speed roll. The one exalt bench mod is pretty good as well. Everything else is pretty rubbish other than celebration, tier 2, tier 3, maybe even tier 4 is okay too. Next, you have a hybrid physical damage % roll. So this is getting into the luxury ones. This is either the Dictator series or the Warlord influence hybrid mods that are similar. Next, you want local crit chance and critical strike multiplier are often very good mods to have. On a bow only, +2 or +1 arrows are very, 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 very powerful mods. Bows are actually really hard to roll because of that, because that mod is so powerful that it is kind of almost absolutely necessary, and also you need some really good prefixes as well. You'll notice that there's almost no influence mods that have been discussed here, really only Warlord mods, and we were going to use that fact a bit later. It means that you can get a bit more use out of Harvest than other types of crafting can. Also, one thing that's important, don't forget quality. 20% on low budget items, but at some point in progression, you're going to want to pay the extra and get the 30%. Or if you're in solo self-found, you're going to want to farm the relevant bench in the betrayal system at some point. So let's start with the ultra low budget crafting methods. Shrieking Essences of Contempt. This is probably the cheapest way, and this is something that is very straightforward as well. You've just made it to maps, you want a weapon to get started. So Shrieking Essences of Contempt are a really good starting point. You keep applying them until you get another good mod with it. So this other good mod will be attack speed or physical % at a useful tier. Benchcraft the one that you're missing. Also consider whether or not an annulment orb is worth using if you are in a position where you can't benchcraft the other mod. So let's say that you've got this configuration. You have your prefixes are Shrieking Essence of Contempt. You've also got the tier 5 physical damage %. So you've got quite a lot of physical damage per hit. Then you've got 3 suffixes, none of which are attack speed. At this point, it's a pretty reasonable chance to say, I'm going to accept a 40% chance of ruining the item, and I'm going to hit this with an Orb of Annulment. If it removes one of the suffixes, fantastic, I'll benchcraft my attack speed. You could also do this via another means. You could use a Beastcraft to remove a suffix and add a prefix. You don't really care what the prefix is, it's not going to make the item any worse than it is, and then that'll free up a suffix for certain. But getting those beasts early in the league can be a little bit of a pain sometimes, and especially if you're in SSF, it's not an option at all. At least consider a YOLO annul, it may or may not be the right decision. Whatever you do, don't use the tier 1 physical % roll on the crafting bench. It costs an exalt and is just not going to be worth it on an item that you are intending to upgrade past soon. Use the tier 2 version until you unveil one of the hybrid mods like physical % and blind chance, and then use that. Also keep your eye open for the good early endgame uniques, Skaver, Wasp Nest, and things like that. All of these can be a really good starting weapon too, and might just mean that you don't need to craft anything. The other ultra low budget method I'm going to suggest is only applicable if you're playing a character that uses one-handed swords, and that is to start with this Divination card, the King's Blade, for a Bloodthirsty Eternal Sword. Bloodthirsty is tier 4 physical damage to attacks from memory, physical %, and as a result, it's an okay starting point to then craft further. What you're going to want to do is turn in this set and apply an Orb of Augmentation to it, which is basically free, then a Regal Orb, which is a little bit more of an expense, but it's an okay investment, it'll pay off. Now at this point, after you've regaled it, does the item have one of attack speed or flat physical damage to attacks at a modest tier? If it does, fantastic, benchcraft the other one. If not, discard, start again with a new set of the King's Blade. I would not normally suggest using divination cards like this, it's just that the King's Blade drops absolutely like crazy. This is the 5th most common divination card to drop in the entire game. Fun fact, this is actually more common than the Carrion Crow that everyone gets annoyed by. So you might think to try this with the Twins, which is a Gemini Claw of Celebration divination card, but that card is something like 4 or 5 times as rare as the King's Blade, and in addition to being much rarer, it also is a larger set size. So for that reason, I don't recommend that. You can try it if you want, and maybe you will have a couple of sets of the Gemini Claw of Celebration card available to you, but just have low expectations. So the next option is a slightly higher budget generally, and that is to upgrade an Incursion item, just using the crafting bench. So Incursion rare items have a good chance to have the very strong Takati's prefix. This is 155 to 169% increased physical damage, and it also has a little bonus, doesn't really matter very much for us, which is chaos damage based on the physical damage you deal. Mostly we're using it because it is a substitute for Merciless / Tyrannical, and it is actually at the same tier as Tyrannical, which is a staggeringly rare mod. If you seek out one of these items that has tier 5 or better flat physical damage or tier 5 or better attack speed, then this is a starting point. Benchcraft the other mod on it, and you've got yourself a really solid starter weapon. You might need a risky annul or a risky beast prefix to suffix in this situation as well. And if you do need that, then use it. You wreck the item, you wreck the item. It's not like you've destroyed anything precious here. It's perfectly fine to settle for an inferior base here. So you might use a Throat Stabber instead of an Imperial Claw. Imperial Claws are better. They're the only ones you would use on a top-end craft, but a Throat Stabber is fine here. Now, to be useful, if you're intending to farm these Incursion items yourself, you will need to allocate Artifacts of the Vaal. Now, this grants a 60% chance for Incursion Architects in areas to drop an additional rare Incursion item. It's actually 100% though, because there's 2 small nodes leading up to it that add another 20% of that stat. And so this means that every Elva mission that you win at, you will get an Incursion item for each of the 3 times Elva appears in that map, and so you'll get 3 of them. Some of these, not many, but some of them will be weapons. Some of them will be the ones you're looking for that have tier 5 or better flat physical damage. It is a bit of a numbers game, but this is one where the numbers are in your favour. Next option is another low budget option around essences, and this is to use Deafening Essences of Contempt. 3 times the price of using Shrieking Essences, but slightly better results, and definitely worth your while upgrading to these once you can afford it. This is a good option, I think, if you've got 1 exalt or so to spend early in the league, and you want to just get yourself a serviceable weapon. Keep applying Deafening Essences of Contempt until you've got at least some attack speed or at least some physical damage %, and then benchcraft the one that you're missing. However, this will work better if you do it on a weapon that has one of the following modifiers to it. Best case is you have a heist enchantment that increases the magnitude of physical modifiers and or speed modifiers. These are really good, but they may not be available early in a league, especially in SSF, but even in Trade League, they can be a little bit scarce early on. So Elder Influence and Warlord Influence are the other ones to consider here. These will just add more good mods into the pool. It's not that they're outstanding, it's not that they're going to make or break this craft, it's just that they're going to give you more chances to hit a result that you're happy with. So for that reason, I recommend Elder Influence or Warlord Influence if you can't get a Heist Enchantment one. If you've got a Heist Enchantment that increases the magnitude of physical damage mods, then that is exactly what you want. It is not worth your while adding those modifications to existing items. So don't apply a Warlord Exalt if you happen to have one of those. Don't apply one of those to a random base. Just find a Warlord base off the ground at some point and save your Warlord Exalt to use later, like when we start looking at the 15 Exalt crafts later on. One thing that's counterintuitive, and it needs to get mentioned here, this will come up multiple times, item level 83 is better than item level 84 plus. This is because item level 84 adds a number of completely unwanted mods into the pool. You really don't want resists on your weapons, not even tier 1 resists. So it's disappointing that there's all these extra mods that you really don't want that have a fairly high weight on rolls. And so for that reason, it is not a good thing at all to use item level 84 if you can avoid it. Item level 84 is still okay, you can still use it, it's just that you will get better results on item level 83. So next option is mostly for Trade League players, although this will sometimes come up through good luck if you're in SSF. And this is sniping items that are veiled items that upon being unveiled could be very good. And I've taken this Apocalypse Barb as an example here that you see in the bottom right of the screen. This is a rune dagger that was listed for trade in the Archnemesis League. It's not particularly good, it was only listed for a few chaos. But this is exactly what you're looking for here. This has flaring on it, adds 29 to 52 physical damage. It also has a veiled mod, and whilst you can't see this here, that veiled mod is a prefix. Now, when you unveil a prefix, If it is a universal syndicate member rather than a specific members, then it has a 34 in 35 chance that one of the options in there will be physical to percent. If it has a specific member's name on it, say for instance, Torah's Veiled, then it has a lower chance. In that case, it would be 19 out of 28. As long as it is not It That Fled, however, it's going to be 19 out of 28. If it's It That Fled has 4 different mods and all of its mods are pretty high weighting. And as a result, ITF ones I don't recommend using. So here what you're looking for on this Golden Chris, you would have Flaring, you would have the Unveiled tier physical damage percent, and then you would benchcraft on the attack speed that you need. And then you've got yourself a really serviceable starter weapon, especially if it was a better base than a Golden Chris, but even then, it's still a usable base. This is really good at League Start, as people will often throw all of their Veiled items into a 5 or 10 Chaos tab. They won't necessarily look at them, and so all you're looking for is a Veiled prefix and Flaring, and at least one open suffix. If you can find that combination, you're golden. Medium budget. Now we're going to go for something that is pure RNG. So this is a stretch to call it crafting. If you run a lot of ROG content from Expedition, every now and again he will offer you a craft that upgrades the tiers of all modifiers on the item to the maximum tier allowed on that item, based upon that item's item level. Now you can farm ROG's logbooks in Trade League chasing this, or chasing some of the other things that are the same thing but a bit weaker than that. You won't often see these really top end mods, but you will fail with style a lot and you'll generate a bunch of items that in a Trade League will sell to other players. And you'll also be able to sell some of the items that drop from logbooks encounters as well too. It's not like you'll just get the artifacts, you'll also get a bunch of other items that people will want. It's counterintuitive, but again, item level 83 is what you want here, and actually it's more important with ROG than it is with anything else. This is because ROG has a frequently offered craft that is reroll the suffixes on the item, biasing towards higher level mods. There's a few different versions of this, but these are really important because they come up a lot. And having the level 84 required resist mods in the pool is a really bad thing. They're terrible on weapons and they will come up a lot if you have an item level 84 plus. So for that reason, you really want ROG's items to be item level 83 or lower. In fact, even though item level 83 is really good because it adds Merciless and Dictators, it adds 2 really good mods into the pool, you're probably actually better to be level 81 than level 84. That's something to keep in mind. Also in the bias your drops rather than your actually crafting category, Heist Enchanted Armaments blueprints are really worthwhile. Every league I find a couple of real genuine treasures there, and that's because of the system that they use to really bias the rolls in your favor on an item. You'll find sometimes that there are some absolutely fantastic drops that will come out of those things. These are not really crafting in the true sense, but they're ways that you can bias your drops in your favor. Next thing on a medium budget is trade only, and this is sniping fractured items. So weapons with god tier fractured mods are very expensive and precious, and in fact that's going to be the very highest budget strategy we're going to cover, is going to involve god tier fractured mods. But if you get a weapon with a just good fractured mod, they can be cheap, and they drop in a lot of places now, and people have started to learn to pick them all up and identify them. And if you don't currently identify fractured items, you should change that. Now your goal here is to get a good tier of physical percent, flat fizz, and attack speed all in one item. Remember that with all physical damage weapons. So having one of these mods locked in makes that a lot cheaper. A weapon here like Demon Spiker is a perfect one to hit with Deafening Essences of Contempt. A Deafening Essence of Contempt will keep the attack speed, it will guarantee you that you will get physical flat damage, and it will also be able to either roll, potentially if you get really lucky, physical percent, or you can just benchcraft it if you've got an open spot. This will end up being a really cheap way to get yourself a weapon that's pretty good. The very best lock mod to look for is a high tier of hybrid physical percent / accuracy, so something like Dictators or Emperors, but whilst Dictators and Emperors are very expensive as lock mod, something like the tier 4 version of that mod, Champions, is still great. If you have locked physical percent or hybrid physical percent, use Deafening Contempts. For locked flat fizz, use Deafening Zeal and benchcraft physical percent. Another medium budget option is to use surgical annuls on messy rare items. So Damnation Null here, this is not quite good enough to justify this crafting method we're going to go through, but I think it's useful as an example of what you can do. So this item is something that needs flat physical on it. If it's not able to craft flat physical on it with a bench, if you need to get rid of a mod on it, like that 55% increased spell damage mod, then what you can do is recognize the interaction between the Benchcraft cannot roll attack mods and the Orb of Annulment. As of 3.17, and I'm not guaranteeing that this is still the case if you're watching this at a later time, annulments cannot choose attack mods while that mod is present, because cannot roll attack mods doesn't just apply to adding mods to the item, it also applies to subtracting mods from it in many ways. The Annulment Orb can remove the cannot roll attack mods. Now, your average cost to remove one non-attack mod from an item that has only one on it is 2 exalts and 2 annuls. Average cost to remove 2 non-attack mods this way is 3.5 exalts and 3.5 annuls. Average chance to remove 3 non-attack mods is 4 and 5/6, so just under 5 of each, so ouch. Note that this doesn't help you remove undesired attack mods, like Tier 7 added lightning to attacks. Whilst there may be ways to remove these, they are not economical in many cases. Now, the main situations you will use this on are well-rolled items from Grand Heist Curios, or well-rolled things that ROG has created, where there's just one item, where there's just one mod on the item that is pure rubbish, and you want to get rid of it so that you can then apply other bench crafts to it, or so that you can take it in other directions with crafting. Maybe you want to multi-mod it out. Maybe it's got 3 great mods on it, 1 terrible mod, and you would like to get rid of that terrible mod so that you can then go multi-mod and add 2 bench-crafted mods to it. That's where you might be considering doing this. Now, I've put together a list here of the probabilities of cleaning an item by using either beast splits or annulment orbs in general. This is something I'd recommend just download from my blog if you want, but link down below to the presentation here, and you'll be able to download this, and it's just got a whole lot of probabilities. I believe these all to be right. If it turns out that I've made a mistake here, I will not update it in the video. I can't update it in the video, but I will update it in the document linked below. So at a medium budget, you can improve heist or ROG well-rolled items. So when you're running a heist, enchanted armaments and replica uniques or experimented bases blueprint, you'll get items that have extremely good mods sometimes. So you'll also get that with ROG crafting. It's very important to say that you can only do this with certain weapon types. You're going to want to check the website POE, link down in the description below, for information to check exactly what types of mods can roll on the weapon that you're using. It also only works if all 3 prefixes are filled with real mods, so that means not bench mods. You can make it work if you've got a bench mod there, but it's going to be much more expensive, and I won't go into that in this video. So often these items are almost great, but they're missing one key piece. If a weapon's got great prefixes and bad suffixes, i.e. it's missing attack speed, you're in luck. And here I'm going to look at what you would do if you wanted to add attack speed onto an item. You can do this differently if you have a different missing piece. So firstly, if the item has 3 suffixes, harvest reforge keeping prefixes until it doesn't. Then once you've done that, craft prefixes can't change. Ouch, this is going to cost you 2 exalts to try. Then you want to use reforge an item with a speed mod. Now you can do that with or without the additional text speed modifiers are more common, but it must say reforge an item with a speed mod. When you do apply that reforge, it's going to always apply a speed mod if there is one in the pool. And for most weapon types, but not all, so this does not work with wands, then you will only have attack speed as an option here. Also with bows, you will get projectile speed as an option that you probably don't want, so keep that in mind, and also a couple of other things. So do check it on POE for the exact weapon type you're looking for. Now this will force some tier of attack speed, but you need tier 3 or better for it to eclipse bench attack speed, and so consider this a 37.5% chance to win for your 2 exalt gamble. And this is the last thing that we're talking about as a medium budget. After this, we're going to start getting to higher budgets. On a high budget, this is going to cost 15 exalts or so and involves moderate RNG. This is what I term the Ashlingless Warlord method. This is an adaptation of a crafting method that was popularized by the streamer Elesshar during 3.14. His original method no longer works, and the underlying idea, however, still does. It abuses Harvest Reforge Plus crafts when there is only one valid mod, Warlord Physical % Hybrid, and does so whilst you have no potential to remove any of the mods that are on the item because you have prefixes can't be changed and suffixes can't be changed simultaneously. This does not work on all categories of weapons. You must check your base type before starting. As an important example of this, it does not work on staves at all in 3.17. So this is going to cost you 9 exalts in bench fees, plus a large and indeterminate number of Deafening Essences of Contempt, a few annulment orbs, and a single Warlord exalt. So that's the sort of price point you're looking at. I think it's generally around 15 exalts, but that can vary a lot depending on the price of Deafening Essences of Contempt and also depending upon some of the other decisions you make as to where to go during the process. So your goal mods, you want to have Deafening Essence of Contempt flat physical damage, which is a bit better than tier 2 flat fizz. You want Warlord hybrid physical percent damage, you want tier 1 benchcrafted physical percent damage or better, and you want tier 2 or better attack speed. That's what we're going to be trying to get onto a weapon, and that will get you solidly in the 500 plus range on a one-hander. So before starting, make sure that you know why this method works and recheck POE, the list of mods there, to make sure it still does. Recheck to make sure that the GGG haven't added a mod in the interim that breaks it, and recheck that you haven't got one-handed swords and thrusting one-handed swords confused. Remember, one-handed swords take up 6 inventory space, thrusting one-handed swords take up 4. Recheck that it is possible on your base once more, because this is important. You don't want to you don't want to throw 15 exalts down the toilet and then realize at the very final step that you actually haven't achieved anything. So you're going to start with a heist enchanted base. Ideally, you want increased effect of physical damage mods with a manageable drawback or no drawback. You want to apply a Warlord exalt to that item to make it a Warlord influenced item. Next, you want to spam Deafening Essences of Contempt until you have tier 2 or better attack speed. At this point, you want to clean it down to a rare item with just those 2 mods. This is going to require annulment orbs and a lot of luck. However, that's the RNG component. From here, it's all deterministic. We're going to force Warlord hybrid percentage fizz with harvest here. So you're going to apply 3 benchcrafts. This is expensive. Multi-mod, prefixes can't change, and suffixes can't change. Then you're going to go harvest reforge plus crit or reforge plus speed, depending upon the base type. The specific craft that you use will depend upon the tag that is present on the Warlord mod that you're chasing. So for example, on a claw, this Warlord hybrid mod is physical damage percent and also critical strike. And as a result, it is critical tagged and therefore it will be reforge plus crit. But you need to check this yourself for your specific weapon. And if it doesn't have a tag, then abort. You cannot use this method. The only valid critical strike modifiers and speed modifiers here will be one of the 5 tiers of Warlord physical percent hybrid. So crit on some bases, speed on others. That's because no other prefixes have the critical tag or the speed tag at all. Then once you've done this, use the crafting bench to remove all bench mods. Then multi-mod the item, craft physical percent and local crit chance, or a different suffix if appropriate to your build. Or alternately, you can craft physical percent from the bench and then double exalt slam. These are your 2 options for finishing the item at this point. Next, divine the item until you're content with it. If in doubt, divine it 50 times in Craft of Exile. So that's on the website craftofexile.com that I'm looking at now. And record the 3rd best roll. Don't roll over anything better than that. Variants on the Warlord method that are at a higher budget. So you need a 1 prefix 1 suffix rare as a starting point. You can alternately go for a flaring weapon, which is already Warlord influenced. This takes about 800 alterations to roll. Once you've got that, add cannot roll a caster mods if it helps the base. That's going to depend whether there's any crafter mods that can roll on that weapon type. And then imprint it and regal it until you get tier 1 attack speed. This is going to be much more expensive than the previous method, but gives better results because a flaring of celebration weapon is considerably better as a starting point than a Deafening Contempt of celebration or infamy, which is what we started with the other way. However, you're using a lot of imprint base to get that. You are using a very large number and it's going to be very expensive. Or you can start with Deafening Essences of Zeal and then try to clean down to the flaring mod plus the Zeal mod. Warning, this is going to require extreme luck and it's a higher price point again. Again, tier 2, the tier 2 mod here, tempered, is too good to roll over. So if you got tempered of Deafening Zeal, that's also a very good starting point. You then proceed with the original method. The alternative that you've got is that you can proceed with the original method as far as you want. So you can start with any of the 3 different starting points, and then you've got the option after the harvest step where you've cleaned off all the crafted mods, put a new multi-mod on it, and you are going to put on the 2 mods that you wanted to use. You can instead accept a 50% chance of ruining the item in order to upgrade it further. And this is going to be through the use of an Ashling Unveil, where what you're going to do is apply your multi-mod as you would do otherwise, but then instead of putting on 2 premium benchcrafts that you actually want to use, just put on 2 rubbish ones. Once you've done that, do the Ashling Unveil. Now, Ashling has a 50% chance to remove one of your 3 benchcrafts, so you've got the multi-mod and you've got the 2 other mods that you put on it, and she is also 50% to remove a real mod ruining the item. If she has a veiled prefix, it's going to be 34 out of 35 to be 120 to 139% physical damage percent as an option, which is fantastic. Veiled suffixes are weaker, but they're still really good. You got to factor in that you have a 50% chance of ruining the item, and you have a slightly less than 50% chance of improving it, because you could just get a suffix that doesn't do very much, and so you could end up getting one of the weaker suffixes, in which case you haven't really improved it enough to justify this cost. So you basically doubled the cost, and you then also need to pay for an extra multi-mod and for an extra Ashling Slam. So it's going to cost you about 40 exalts instead of 15 this way. Now we're going to come to an ultra high budget option, and this is fractured items. This is going to be in the 100 to 300 exalt range generally, mostly around the 180 to 200 range though. It's a small upgrade over the last method. Now, I want to start with a disclaimer. Acquiring a Headhunter or a Mageblood will offer a bigger upgrade for your character for a comparable price point. So do that first. You got your belt sorted and you've got a couple of hundred exalts left over, then in this case, let's proceed with this discussion. So your starting point, you want to trade for a high space. Level 83 exactly if possible, although level 84 plus is still okay, and it needs to have at least 8% increased effective physical mods as an enchant on it. Next, you want to roll this with Jagged Fossils. You want to keep applying Jagged Fossils until the item has one of Merciless or Dictators as a prefix. This is going to cost you an average of 150 Jagged Fossils and 1 slot Resonators. Now, once you've got this, you want to divine the item until that specific mod is perfect. You don't need to go quite to the extent of perfect on Dictators. My general rule of thumb here is that you'd accept anything that's 190% plus on the accuracy roll, and that's 79% on the, perfect 79% on the physical damage roll. Average cost here, 10 Divines Merciless, 12.5 for a Dictator, so it's about 1 Exalt. However, here we're going to come to the big expense after this. You want to use the crafting bench and or the remove suffix add prefix beast crafts to add enough mods that the item is ready for the big RNG step, which is the fracture craft. And now you're either going to use fracture an item with at least 5 mods. If you do this, you'll have an 80% chance of ruin and a 20% chance of permanently locking your perfectly rolled Merciless mod onto your item. Or you can use fracture a prefix on an item with exactly 3 prefixes, which will have a 2 in 3 chance of ruin. These crafts are very expensive. They currently cost 13 and 34 exalts respectively. This is late in 3.17, although they were cheaper earlier in the league. They also require a degree of trust between the seller and the buyer. Which one of them is better depends upon the market price of the enchanted base, and that maths is up to you. Now, note that you are competing with other buyers who want these crafts for different purposes. So for example, someone that is playing a minion build might want to lock in the Incursion minion prefix that's really, really good. They're wanting to lock that in so that they can guarantee that with +1 to the level of minion skills and +1 to the level of all spell skills. That's what they want it for. You want it for something else, and you're having to compete with them. You're going to be trying to outbid each other. So if you do hit the big one, if you do hit Merciless locked in, or you hit Dictators locked in, and you've got it really well rolled, then at this point, it's going to take somewhat of a miracle to make something perfect, but you have the first step towards it. You'll see here Morbid Slicer that I pictured in the bottom right of the screen is an example that is available for trade in the current league. This has not been taken as far as it could be. It doesn't have the highest enchant, and they've stopped earlier than I would have in terms of upgrading it further. But perfecting your other prefixes is the next step. Assuming that you succeeded in locking in Merciless, it's now 1 in 32,000 with a Jagged Fossil to hit exactly Dictators and Flaring with each Jagged Fossil. 1 in 32,000 sure beats the literal lottery odds of 1 in 8.68 million, but it's still pretty impractical to sit there and use 32,000 of these things on it. However, it's 1 in 6,400 if you are willing to stop when you miss by 1. So let's say that you get Emperors instead of Dictators and you still have Flaring. And if you're willing to miss by 2, so you might have tier 2 of both types of mod, or tier 3 of one and tier 1 of the other, then in that case it's only 1 in 1,900 to hit that combination using your Jagged Fossils. And at this point, it's much, much, much more realistic to hit that. Even when you hit something that's that good, you want to craft prefixes can't be changed, and then Reforge plus speed until you have tier 1 attack speed. On a claw, this step is going to average cost you 16 exalts. Now, in the Arch Nemesis League, no one seems to have a Merciless Dictators Flaring and Celebration item that's been made this way, with the 8% highest enchant on it as well. But there is a claw with those mods that isn't fractured. I think this came from Rog and Tempering Orbs, although I'm not certain of that. I didn't ask the seller. That is 700 physical DPS. That's the best claw in the league. So that one wasn't fractured, but it would have been easier to make if it was fractured. I think that that person got it via ROG giving the lucky upgrade all mods to their maximum tiers, although I'm not sure of that. Anyway, that's all I got on this. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, may your Varlobs have interesting results, and don't use them on really expensive claws because you will regret it.